Succession planning is so personal. It's so intimate because there's a lot of just emotional impact in that transition. To give some context around how difficult this actually is, I interviewed a young man at 25 years old whose dad lost his third battle with cancer, and at 25 years old, he finds himself as the CEO. The emotions in that episode, this guy's trying to hold it together to answer my questions. Maybe I should pull back, or maybe I need to empathize a little bit more. This is a real person. This is a real struggle. This is not as cut and dry as the trust documents make it out to be.
Meet Barrett Young, partner at GWCPA and host of the Art of Succession podcast. He helps business owners navigate the biggest leadership handoff of their careers.
What motivated you to launch a podcast a year ago?
I'd been wanting to get back into podcasting for a long time. We realized that we had a lot of knowledge around succession planning. Then it became very clear I need to tell these stories. Every podcast guest is going to have a different story. That's exciting to me. I get to have 2 new conversations each month with somebody I've never met, and they're going to open up to me in a way that most people don't open up to other professions.
Why interview podcast specifically? Why not self-hosted? Why not co-hosted with your partner?
Because the topic is
The Art of Succession podcasts. Can you tell me about that, Barrett?
Certainly. So the Art of Succession podcast, we started about a year ago. Our accounting firm, CPA firm, works primarily with multi-generational businesses. And so we handle the transition from that first generation to the second to the third, sometimes even the fourth generation in the case of some of our really long-term clients. And so when we decided a couple of years ago, we went through a marketing and a rebranding, becoming a niched accounting firm instead of a more traditional firm where each partner would decide what kind of clients they want to work with. And we realized that we had a lot of knowledge around succession planning, and that we should focus on that rather than just saying we do taxes for everybody, we do financial statements, we do audits. So when we started to focus, then it really came into light. These are the stories that we should tell. If I'd been wanting to get back into podcasting for a long time, I just didn't know what the content would be. I didn't want to do a generalist tax strategy podcast because there are a lot of those on the marketplace. And I didn't really know who that target market would be until we had that clarity going through that rebranding. Once we did, then it became very clear I need to tell these stories to give our listeners some context around how difficult this transition actually is, especially on the emotional side. That's why it's the art of succession and not the deal, the science of succession, because there's a lot of just emotional impact in that transition.
Okay, so many things I want to follow up on here, Barrett. Let's start with something that I don't get to ask often. But you're in the great, universe of podcasts. You have a relatively new one, right? 1 year ago is not that far, especially when you see podcasts that have been around for years, if not decades. So I still get the question sometimes, or more the observation, that podcast is too crowded now. It looks like everybody has a podcast. What motivated you to launch a podcast a year ago? And what are your thoughts on that statement? Podcast is too busy.
This is not my first podcast, so that's part of it. So I've had 3 podcasts in the past, over a decade ago. Some of them launched at this time. They're no longer around, but I love podcasting. I've been listening to podcasting. I mean, some of my earliest gaming podcasts that I started in the medium listening to, I was going back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been listening to those since 2006, 2007. So really early on in podcasting. So I know that there's space for podcasts because I'm always finding new podcasts. I will listen when I come across a new topic. I'll listen to 5 or 6 podcasts at a time and find out which ones I like as far as the content, which ones I like as far as the rapport that I feel like I have with the hosts. The length of the podcast, all of those are variables that are going to be completely different. So if we've got 8 billion people on this planet, we probably have room for 1 billion podcasts. And we're not even close to that at this point because there's just so much variety in terms of what people like. I mean, that would be like saying, we can't produce movies anymore because we've already got the 5 movies that we need produced for this year. And because those are going to be the top 5 blockbusters this year, there's no room for anything smaller than that. There's no room for a for a movie that only appeals to like a tenth of that audience or 100 of that audience. I think we're not even at 500,000 podcasts, active podcasts at this point. So there's tons of room still for podcasts.
So I should know. I know that there are 4.3 million podcasts out there, potentially a bit more now, but we are talking about a couple hundred max. The active ones is a fraction of this. Yeah, 700K active podcasts. Bit hard to define, but at least release one episode, and that's a study back from 2022. So
when everybody was launching podcasts post-COVID,
exactly.
possibly.
So 2020 is the biggest year ever, but 2022 was still strong indeed.
Yeah.
What game are you geeking on, Barrett? If not that indiscreet, if you're listening to some gaming podcast, what game? That's for my personal curiosity.
Back in the day, it was role-playing games and tabletop dice games like Warhammer, War Machine, little miniature combat games. So
I'm gonna geek for 1 minute here, guys, and then we're back to the podcasting. I swear, Barrett, I'm into the 4th book of the Horus Heresy.
okay.
Oh my freaking god! Pardon my French. I'm French. This is such a fantastic world. Anyways, very expensive as well, the figurines. Love this. Okay, but more about this after we're done with the recording. Can you tell me a bit more about your niche? The reason I'm saying this is you mentioned a few things that we preach all over as much as possible. It's like if you start a podcast, yes, there are a lot of podcasts out there. If you start a podcast, you need to pick a niche and narrow down, especially when you start on that niche and then potentially expand. Not only did you do that with the podcast, you did that with your business. So can you tell us a bit more about this? Like why that choice, why that niche, and how's it going?
So I'll start by saying I am the 9th partner in succession in an 80-year-old CPA firm. So succession planning, the difficulty of succession, to pull it off well, that's built into who we are. We've never had a partner who's left out of contention. We've never had a partner who's split the company. It's me and one other partner right now, so the 8th and 9th in that succession, and we see what we do as like a stewardship of this isn't our company. This is our company that we are in control of and have to help, determine the direction for the present. But we both see like our goal is to make sure that the company exists 80 years from now for future generations as well. So that's kind of in our DNA. And because of that, we've had a lot of customers who've been with us for 20, 30. We have a customer who's been with us for 60 years, and she remembers coming and visiting with one of our founding partners at 5 or 6 years old with her dad, back in the 50s to go and see his accountant. So we have this longevity with our clients, and so we've seen these clients go through transitions. We have a few customers who are 4th generation businesses, a lot that are 2nd, some are 3rd. And in traditional CPA services, you might do one business transition in a 5-year period. And we are averaging right now, even before focusing and trying to attract that kind of business, we average like 4 or 5 in a year. And so that's a depth of knowledge that most CPAs, when they're doing a tax return, are going to say, I know I remember how to do this. I've taken a class on this a number of years ago. I can figure it out. And so they're going to take a class. They're going to refresh their brain on what all the details of that transition are going to be. Because most CPA firms want to work with early businesses or established businesses, but not a lot of them work with clients for the 20 or 30, 40 years that it takes in order to get them to that succession point. So we have specialized knowledge in this, and that was what we came to see through the marketing. Now, our firm is unique also because we are very innovative in our firm. And so we're using AI. We are, both me and my partner have been recognized within our profession for being on the front lines. My partner was using AI in audit back in 2018. So we know that we can't just continue on the way we've always done things and still have a company that's worth passing on 80 years from now. And so that's what we also bring to our clients is you can't just guilt your kids into taking over this business and hope the family business continues on forever. There has to be innovation there. There has to be changes to adapt to a new economy, to the future, so that they're excited to take over this vehicle of wealth generation. They're excited to step into that. So that's kind of marrying those two things together, longevity, but longevity through innovation, because without either one, innovative companies, build really quickly and sell. Longevity companies could just continue doing the same thing as forever because it provides a living, but it doesn't really grow. It doesn't really excite the next generation. So
Yeah.
it's the marriage of those two things for us.
And so how is that going, you think? So to maybe put a bit more context in the question, how is that going for you, in your opinion? So with ifs, we can redo the whole world, we say in French. But compared to if you wouldn't have niched down, right? Or if you would have niched down on something else. What's your perspective on that?
So we knew that we had to, because tax season is terrible. I don't know if you've ever gone through tax season as a preparer. I know you had some time there at PwC, but I don't think you were on the tax side. But the hours and the time pressure and the volume that you have to do in a traditional CPA practice, you have got to build your firm to target that. And that is, we are going to rush at 100 miles an hour for 4 months, and then we're going to take the rest of the year off until we start doing year-end planning. That's an optimized tax firm. We were burning out people by trying to do that. We were doing taxes, and then a lot of firms will do like audits in the summer after tax season to spread out the work, keep people employed. But we couldn't keep talent. Before I came along in 2017, they couldn't interest another person to step into the partnership role to move into this. And I actually left tax season. I did about 6 tax seasons and then went out on my own and ran an accounting company that didn't do taxes at all for 6 years because taxes was just so detrimental. The tax season pressure or density was so detrimental to having a family with young kids that I left for 6 years. And it was only by working with my mentor, hearing her vision of a world without tax season, a world that is year-round advisors for our clients in a year that's doing bigger things than saying, here's your tax bill, that I came in and joined this company. So we knew we had to change, and that required us to say, we're not doing audits anymore. We don't do individual tax unless they're a business owner of one of our business clients. That's pretty standard for a lot of firms. But then also saying, we're going to take even a bigger view than just this next year with your strategic planning. Like, what is your goal for the company 5 years from now, for 10 years from now? What are those conversations you need to be having with your successor to identify them, to train them up, to be sure that you don't just walk away from this company and collapse after you leave? This company has been your baby for 20, 30, 40 years. It has a place in the community. You love your employees here. You love everything about this company. You don't want to just sell it to PE. And so there's got to be steps that are taken in order to make sure that this happens successfully, because the success rate on second and third generation businesses is terrible. 30% of businesses make it into the second generation, I think is the stat, and then just slightly more than 10 make it into the third generation. So there's something that happens there in that second generation where the company just disappears. And we think it's because of the lack of innovation, not being set up for success when they took over the company. And it was just like assumed, no, just keep doing what we've been doing. It's successful. We make, $10 million a year. And if you just do this, ride it until the wheels fall off. So we think that there's something broken there, and that's who we want to work with. That's who we are working with. And it's because tax season is not our focus anymore. It's allowed us to do bigger projects. It's allowed us to do these transitions in January, February, March, when most CPA firms are like, can we just talk about this in the summer? We're kind of busy right now on other things. And so that's what's in our model now.
So do you feel that because of the importance of planning properly for the succession of a business, you want an absolute expert on it? The reason I'm asking this is I love this analogy and I use it when I talk about podcasts. It's, okay, you need to have back surgery, right? You have 2 options. The first one is super renowned surgeon, 20,000 hours plus in the block, has operated on like multiple different organs, including back, whatever. And you have the second option, which is a surgeon who has done 20,000 hours plus in the block only on backs. Which one do you go to, and why the second one? Do you feel that because succession of a business, if you plan for it right, it means you want to take it seriously, it's important for them to have that person who has that deep expertise, because it's such a once generation event. How do you make that link?
I will say our approach is also very collaborative. And so traditional CPA firms, because they go into it of a model of whatever the customer asks for, we're going to figure out how to do it. And so they get spread very thin because they think, oh, this client needs a review for a large line of credit. We're going to learn how to do reviews. This client over here needs accounting, so we're going to start doing accounting. They get spread very thin because we are focused on what we do and we say, these are what we do. These are the areas where we need to bring in somebody else who's going to be the expert. And so here in the States, we have a designation. It's the CPA, Certified Exit Planning Advisor. And what we really love about that model is a CPA, a financial planner who's got a CPA designation, they're going to come in and they're going to quarterback this transition, but they're not going to try and do everything. And so you might have one who's an expert in personal financial planning, one who's an expert in insurance and risk. They're going to bring in an attorney. They're going to bring in a tax CPA. They're going to bring in a personal CPA, on individual taxes. And so that's kind of our model, is collaborative and saying, when you work with us, we're not going to try and grab the entire piece of the pie here because it's not going to be for your benefit. We are going to bring in our relationships, and you're probably going to be working with 3 or 4 of us at any given time. We are going to head that up and oversee that and make sure that everybody is staying on track, especially with how many moving parts there are. That's the role that we see, but we're not going to try and say we can solve all of these things. And so we might bring in a business valuation specialist if necessary. We would bring in, a financial planner so that we know what the family's wealth is going to be, how it's going to be allocated for the future. We're moving to the place right now where once the first generation of business owner has exited the business, we're working on finding strategic tax CPAs that do individual and financial planning for senior citizens, because we realize once you are out of the business, we have no business continuing to do your tax return for the next 20, 30 years. There's so much information around senior care, around Medicare, which is, our insurance program here in the United States, around medical deductions, all timing of distributions from retirement, all of these things. We shouldn't be doing that when we say that we are experts on business tax and the succession component of the lifestyle of that business.
I love this. Let's tie it back to your podcast, and I think more to your marketing strategy, Barrett, because you mentioned a few things here that I particularly liked, and have a bit of insider information from our previous call. So how have you decided of the split of responsibilities within your firm? Because I believe you're doing something that is quite unusual for CPA firms when it comes to marketing.
So there's 2 partners, 2 CPAs currently in our firm. We're a small firm, 14, 15 people. In the past, we've been up to, anywhere from 4 to 5 CPAs down to 2. Rather than us each handle our own client list, our own book of business, we have consolidated everything within the firm. So I am the tax partner currently. My partner is the accounting partner. She's in charge of compliance and financial statements. She's also the managing partner of the firm, so it's also her job to run the company. My second hat in the company is the marketing partner. We've never had a marketing partner. We've never had a marketing wing, because in traditional CPA firms, every CPA wants to play their own games of golf, and so they all go out and find their own clients. We are consolidating that because we have one target client, one client list within our firm. We are going to have one voice in the marketplace. And so that's actually the piece I love. And so when I can find a qualified tax partner to come and join us, that will be the part that I will be letting go and continuing on in the marketing role. And that's allowed us to have things like focus. I know which platforms we're going to be on, what our voice is going to be on those platforms, what our efforts are going to be throughout the year. We're going to focus on this, and then next quarter we're going to focus on this, and we're going to continue to sustain this while we move forward, because it's all united around one common why in the marketplace.
Again, it's back to that niching down, focusing aspect of things. Like, we have one firm, we're going to double down on our expertise, and we're going to put twice the amount of focus by splitting roles and responsibilities. And just to be clear, that's what we do at GHA Marketing as well. I'm in charge of marketing, and Hussam is in charge of delivery. How is that going? Like, you systematize marketing, you made the choice of a podcast. I think you did some things on YouTube as well. How do you decide of what marketing endeavor to pursue, especially in that very narrow B2B space?
So it's been very fun over the past 2 years for me to figure our strategy out. We have a marketing agency that we work with as well. I have a monthly coaching call with her. She helps keep me on track and focused. I don't just go off and do things on my own. I still, me and my partner meet about these things and we talk about them, and she helps me focus on areas where, this will be a better focus for the coming quarter. One of the things we're trying to do right now is we're implementing EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. That's a pretty popular operating system within small businesses, and it recognizes two roles within a business. You have the visionary and you have the integrator. I'm very much on the visionary side, and my partner loves to live in the integrator side. Because I'm on the visionary side, I do have all sorts of new ideas for marketing. And I'm like, ooh, that didn't work. I'm going to completely scrap that and we're going to move over here. We are working on implementing EOS so that we have more consistency, we have more follow-up, so that I don't just try something and scrap it 2 months later and move on to the next thing. But once I'm in that role of the visionary and saying, these are your areas of responsibility, go explore, then I get to try new things. So 2 things unique about our podcast that I hadn't done with previous podcasts. One is that it's video first. So it is a YouTube podcast. It starts on YouTube and then it gets distributed via audio. The second thing is that it's an interview podcast. This is the first one that I've ever done where I'm interviewing guests primarily, rather than a self-guided podcast or me and a buddy talking on regularly about the topic, which all my previous podcasts have been. Because it's video, that's a new area for me to explore that's different than the previous podcasts that I've had. And YouTube is completely different than throwing my audio podcast up on Transistor and having it go out to Apple and Spotify and all the audio methods. Because YouTube has a different algorithm. It's better for search, but it's also worse for long form retention. And so that's allowed me to experiment a little bit with the medium and say, okay, well, what would a podcast look like on YouTube in order to ensure that people are getting the full content of the episode? And so I think that's what you're alluding to. Second season of the show, I split my show into 6-month seasons so that I could try different things and stick with it for 6 months and then look at the results and see if it worked. Second season of the show, which launched January 2025, I split the video episodes of the podcast in half. And so it went from it being about a 55 to 100 to 65 minute podcast down to 2 episodes of about 30 minutes in length. That tripled, or even in some cases quadrupled, the retention on the episode rather than just doubling it. If somebody listens to 12 minutes of a 30-minute podcast where they used to listen to 12 minutes of a 60-minute, that's just doubling the retention rate. But because the episodes were shorter, people were listening 3 or 4 times longer than they had been before. The retention graph was paying off. And then the click-through rate on the second episode would be less, but the retention on the second episode would be even higher, which means that people who had jumped the gap from that first episode to the second episode were listening to the entire thing more often. There just wasn't as many results from browse. When it's labeled part 2, you would think most people don't just click on that and listen to the whole thing without the context of part 1. So that was one of the experiments that I had the opportunity to run with YouTube. It's still released in its entirety on audio, and we're seeing great downloads growth from that. But you don't get that kind of feedback on, well, how long are they actually listening? I know like Spotify and Apple, they try to quantify how long somebody actually makes it into the podcast, but it's not as good data as you would get from a YouTube video.
Why video first?
When I used to listen to those gaming podcasts 20 years ago, I would try to find out the last name of the hosts, which they didn't always share. They were very much just like, here's the first name. And I've listened to these people for like 10 years and realized I've never seen a picture of them. Unless I was going to a gaming convention and they happened to do a booth or a live episode or that's something there. I never got to connect the actual person to the voice that I was listening to. So I was always searching. I want to put a face to this name. I want to see who this person is because I feel like they're my best friend, but we would walk past each other if we were in the same room. And so you have that familiarity with podcasts, which is awesome. You really do feel like you're listening to them and, you have this rapport with them. It's definitely only one way. But I don't have a face to connect to them. About 5, 6, 7 years ago, I started moving towards watching podcasts on YouTube. Or if I found out that some of the gaming podcasts, for example, they started doing live streams on YouTube and they would do a live play. And I'd be able to go and watch them and it'd be like, oh, that's who they are. That's what they look like. And I'd just sit there and watch a live play for, 3 or 4 hours of them just role playing on cameras. So that is where I saw my own consumption habits moving towards. I liked the video component. Now, if I'm mowing the lawn, if I'm washing the dishes, I can still just listen to the audio and it's in my pocket, but I have YouTube Premium, so I can do that if they have a YouTube podcast. And so that's where I had seen my own consumption habits moving towards. And then also as an interviewer, we're recording the video for this podcast right now. And as an interviewer, I had already been recording with my previous co-hosts. If we were doing a remote recording, we had been using the video already because it's so much easier to talk to somebody and interact with somebody when you're seeing how they're responding, when you're seeing their visual cues, than it is if we were to record a podcast by both picking up a phone and talking on a phone and recording the phone conversation. So we already had the video in there, but we were using Skype and the video quality was terrible. And the streaming, the speed that you would get off of YouTube, all the things have really come together over the past 5 or 6 years, especially with tools like Riverside that records in high quality, allows you to edit in the platform. It's just gotten so much better and so much easier, a better experience to have a video podcast at this point.
Why do you feel that is important though? So I understand it's easier aspects. So if it's easier and actually, as easy as just publishing an audio podcast, that's a good reason enough. But I believe you mentioned video first. So is having your audience and your guests able to see you, connect with you, emotionally react to your face, your gimmicks, your body language? Is that important to you in a podcast?
It is because of, for me, the sensitivity of what we're talking about. I want to know,
Interesting.
am I edging too close to something here in this discussion? Should I push into it? Or is everything in their body language saying, if you ask that next question, I'm going to cut this and we're going to edit out that question because I don't want to go there. Because succession planning is so personal, it's so intimate, because you're dealing with somebody who's been butting heads with their dad or their mom or a partner that they had to get out of the company. I interviewed a young man at 25 years old whose dad lost his third battle with cancer. And at 25 years old, he finds himself as the CEO of a 75-person manufacturing plant in upstate New York. The emotions in that episode, sure, I'm sure they could have been conveyed audio, but it was so much clearer in a video podcast. And me as the host, I'm realizing, this guy's trying to hold it together to answer my questions. And so maybe I should pull back, or maybe I need to empathize a little bit more, to show that I'm feeling what he's sharing. So that's what comes through with video. And I know you've talked with your guests before about the future of AI podcasting, and avatars are going to be doing podcasts and everything like that. I was listening to one of those episodes this morning, but video podcasting is going to be one of the clear differentiators that this is a real podcast. These are real people still recording this podcast, because the audio podcasts are getting very, very slick. Just hear two people. I mean, there's a tool out there right now where you can throw your financial statements into a tool and it will generate a podcast, quote unquote, of two people talking back and forth about the company's financial position. And everybody's like, oh, this is the future. This is amazing. And I'm like, this is boring. Like, there's no emotion here. There's no connection here. I want to have a podcast where you and I talk about the financial performance of a company, where we actually say, what did you expect was going to happen? What did happen? What do you want to make? What decisions do you want to make for the future? Not just have two voices tell us the company increased its revenue last month over the prior month. because I'd rather read that. I don't need to hear that. But with a video podcast, we have the opportunity to connect with humans. This is a real person. This is a real struggle. This succession planning is not as cut and dry as the planning trust documents make it out to be.
Barrett, there are so many things I want to double down here. So we didn't do this on purpose, but like the fact that we got into the podcast space is a blessing for Hussam and I, because podcast, in our opinion, and obviously we are saying this because we are in this space, but I genuinely believe, because we're not gonna stay in podcasts all our life, I do think that podcast as a channel, as a medium, if done well, is a hedge against AI. Because, I mean, why people are still listening to educational podcasts? You can literally have all the answers you want with ChatGPT. Well, guess what? The fact that the information is available doesn't mean that it's consumed. And what you just pointed out here, real humans, real connections. We are remote, right? Probably 6 or 7 hours away from each other, which is even more powerful when you're in person. Everything that you can transmit in a podcast, the unexpected as well, right? We are humans. We're going to have talks about the Horus heresy. Have that AI talk about this in a financial statement analysis. Like, this is, for us, why, I mean, podcast is growing, podcast is exploding, our company is doing very, very well. It's because with all this, you go to LinkedIn, and you're active on LinkedIn, Barrett, you probably know it. You scroll through 9 posts out of 10 are AI generated, with 9 comments out of 10 being AI generated. It's just robots talking to robots. And people are happy with that. But people go to podcasts because you have that human connection. And I love this, it's notebook LLMs, I think, from Google, where you just can throw any topics at it, and it creates a podcast. And it's not that used. And for sure, for students, it's amazing. Like, students, go for it, amazing. But like, that connection with podcasts is irreplaceable, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I don't think either one of us are against the use of AI or the implementation of AI. We both, I'm sure, heavily use it on certain aspects, but this is one of those things where it's like, why would I use it to replace this piece? This piece is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'll use it to do the transcript. I'll use it to generate questions. I'll use it to, optimize the distribution of this across all the networks so that I don't have to sit there clicking buttons all day. But the conversation, the one-on-one conversation that I'm having with a business owner, why would I give up that opportunity? That's what I'm here for. That's where the growth happens.
I love this, which was actually my next question. Why interview podcast specifically? Why not self-hosted? Why not NPR style? Why not co-hosted, right, with your partner? Why an interview podcast of, people who bought or sold their businesses?
Because the topic is so interesting to me, I can be curious. And that's all I have to do as a host. Every podcast guest is going to have a different story. Everyone is going to have something different that I can dig into. And so for me, as the visionary, that's exciting to me. I get to have 2 new conversations each month with somebody I've never met, and they're going to open up to me in a way that most people don't open up to other professions. CPAs find out all sorts of things that most people would never tell their attorney, but they're comfortable telling it to their CPA. So I really love that aspect about it. Is it's a curiosity for me. It's exploration. My previous 3 podcasts were just a buddy and a beer kind of podcast around different topics. I'm not a scripter. I really struggle doing YouTube videos that are scripted. I stick to bullet points, but really because I have 20 years of experience in this field, the best videos are the ones where I can just riff on something and share personal experience, share why the decisions we made are the way that they are. And so that doesn't really lend itself to a nice, tightly edited podcast. I love edited podcasts. Like Freakonomics was an early one, Startup. Those are like really well scripted, well produced podcasts. I'm not that host. And so the alternative for me is an exploration interview podcast, which is what I did, or me and a buddy talking about a topic. Haven't closed the door on that one. That will be possible. I had my partner, she was a guest on the show because she's the 8th partner in succession here. So she launched season 2 back in January 25. And we had a great conversation. But that conversation, because we're so connected and so, we know so intimately the inner workings of our company, it can be very easy for other people to not gain benefit from that. And so that's what I saw in those podcasts where it was me and a buddy just talking about different topics, is the listenership never really grew. There would be some listeners who absolutely loved listening to us, but to build the rapport there that I had with those gaming podcasts, you have to have a large base of exposure in order to find the 20, 30, 200, 300 listeners that are going to tune in every single week to hear you and a buddy riff for 2 hours on a topic. And I didn't think that that would grow as quickly or be as beneficial to the audience as tuning in twice a month to hear a new business, all of the issues that that business dealt with, so that you can apply that to your own succession journey.
In its nature, your podcast doesn't really optimize for recurring listener. The reason I'm asking this is, it was more of a statement than a question, but please take it as a question. If I'm listening to a succession podcast, business-wise, it's probably because I'm considering or planning for my succession as well. But once I'm done with it, there is no reason for me to consume more content. Do you see this, or do you have recurring listeners over years after years after years? I mean, you're in the podcasting game for a year, so it's a bit tricky, but do you see some recurring listeners coming back again and again?
I do.
Interesting.
So here's the thing. I don't know what your podcast habits are like, but mine, I don't listen to a podcast. I don't listen to the podcast that I was listening 20 years ago. I don't,
Fair enough.
most of them have closed anyways, but my interests shift. I'll listen to a podcast for 2 or 3 years, and then I'll get the gist of their approach, their understanding of that material. Maybe I will just get bored of the interaction or the approach to the podcast. I'll want something different. And so I'm kind of leaning into that with this, because I do know you're right. If somebody is taking over a business a year from now, they want to get as many answers as they can in the next year, and then they're going to move on because they aren't going to sell that company again for another 25 or 30 years, right? So there is that in there. But what I'm doing over that time is, when you do find this topic, because you are interested in it, you're going to find eventually, I've got a back catalog of 100 episodes, and every single one's going to be a different story. I've got a back catalog of 300 episodes. Every single one is going to be a different story. So somebody might come to this and they only have a year until they take over the succession of their business, but they're going to listen to all 300 of those episodes in that year.
Interesting.
And then when they have another friend who's going through something similar and they're like 2 years away, 5 years away from taking over a company, they're like, dude, you've got to listen to this podcast because it helped me ask all the right questions of my mentor, my boss, my father, my mom, so that I was prepared. And so that person is going to find the podcast, and they're going to see there's, 300 episodes here to listen to as well. So that I'm leaning into that. I understand I'm not seeking listeners who are going to be listening to this 10 years from now, but I've got you for 2 to 3 years. And if the content continues to be interesting, I mean, when I find a new podcast, I can quickly determine, is this a podcast that's worth going back and listening to the past 4 episodes for, or should I go back all the way to day 1 and start on day 1 and just work through my podcast player, consuming every single episode that this podcast has produced? So that's my goal, because the stories are going to be so different. There's going to be different questions, different case studies explored. Finding a way to organize that, make it more readily available to those listeners to say, these are the ones where it was where it was a buyer's perspective. These are the ones where they sold. These are the ones where it was inherited or something along those lines. That's going to be a little bit harder for me to figure out how to sort and organize that and make it easier for them. But the goal is that the episodes are going to be so different as far as like the story being told that they would want to go back and listen to everything in a short period of time.
Why 2 episodes a month only and not once a week?
It's a good question. I actually played around with that leading into season 3 here in July of 25.
Interesting.
At first, it was because I didn't have a good source for interviews, for booking interviews. And so I was trolling Facebook groups. I was trying to just match with anybody, trying to explain to them, I'm not just looking for anybody who runs their own company. Podcast guest booking groups are very broad in who they appeal to. I'm trying to find not just a business owner, I'm trying to find a business owner that bought their company from somebody else. And so that's a very narrow field. I was nervous about that when I started. And so also because I want this to be a long-term game, I didn't want to just go out the gate running and then, fade into non-existence 3 or 4 months from now because I ran out of my runway. So 2 per month allowed me to make sure that I had always 3 or 4 episodes already recorded and I was not running up against a deadline. With tax season still being somewhat of a reality in our business also, when I launched in July, I knew tax season's 6 months away. I'm not going to be able to continue recording 2 episodes a month during tax season. And so I have to have something booked up, a little bit of extra episodes here going into the tax season. So sure enough, the end of March, the heaviest part of tax season, I was out of episodes. I did not have a guest to release on the first Tuesday of April. I release on the first and third Tuesday of each month. So I'm less than 2 weeks away from that, and I'm about to miss an episode, the first time that it's ever happened. I've reached out to my peer group of CPAs. I've interviewed most of them already for season 1. I'm in the Facebook groups, and I guest on somebody else's podcast. I signed up to be a guest on somebody else's podcast, and she mentions a site called Podmatch. And she said it's been a great source for her for matching. And I check it out and I sign up, and in the algorithm over there, Alex, what he's built over there has been so great. The algorithm over there, I think I had like 12 or 14 interviews booked up for not just to get that one episode out, but through the month of May. And so I was able to book up through the rest of 2025 in just less than a month of being on Podmatch with my target audience, as narrow as I wanted it to be, with people readily free and a system built to make scheduling easy and vetting easy and the follow-up easy. So it was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. I've told Alex this, like, you saved my podcast from that dreaded missed schedule. So going into season 3, I was like, well, I've got that piece solved. Do I move now from 24 episodes a year to 52 episodes a year? Do I just go to a yearly basis? What kept me from doing that is because I'm in the marketing partner role, but my job here, my goal here is not to build this around me for the next 30 years or for the next 20 years that I'm in this firm. Eventually, I will need to move into the managing partner role and run the company. I would love to continue to podcasting, but I need to make sure that I'm building an expectation and a schedule that continues to grow. I don't want this to be a 2-year project. I want this to be continuing for 7 to 10 years from now. And to bring in somebody else to host, to take over this role in the future, I don't want to throw them into an expectation of, and you have to do it weekly.
Yeah.
And so I want to leave that room because we have other marketing things that are our focus, other pieces that are our attention also. So I want to leave that room and just be consistent with 2 episodes a month. One of my best friends in the profession, he's been running a podcast for CPAs for 160 episodes at 1 episode per month. So you do the math on that. He's been running this podcast for 15 years.
Jeez.
And 1 episode per month consistently over 15 years. And I remember when I launched my podcast and we were doing every week, and I'm like, what are you doing only once a month? We're going to, we blew up. We got to 100 episodes really quickly in our podcast. But then it fizzled out. It died because we ran out of content to talk about 2 years in. So we were one of those 4.5 million podcasts, but we were in that big, not active differential there between 4.5 to 700,000, whereas he's just beat a steady drumbeat of 1 episode per month for over 15 years. And I'm like, that's longevity. That's what we're talking about when we talk about succession planning too, is not a flash in the pan business that's here today and gone 5 years from now, but can you continue doing the things that make you successful for 30, 40, 80 years? And so that was why currently I have stayed away from moving to a weekly podcast. I've definitely played around with the idea of doing short run podcasts, maybe do a 10 episode limited series and release those on the opposite weeks, and then just package that and say, this is a playlist to go listen to rather than just it's going to continue forever. But those are future plans and tests that I'll be running.
I love it. Barrett, there are so many more questions that I want to ask you, but it might have to take a second episode because we are arriving at the end of this recording. There is a question that I ask all my guests, which is, what do you think will still be true in podcasting in 10 years? And this is inspired from Jeff Bezos always asking the question at Amazon, what's still going to be true in 10 years? Not like what is going to change in 10 years. So we know what to double down on. But for you, I'm going to tweak this question a bit. You have gone through 3 seasons of 6 months, right? Since you started the podcast, I believe. What's the test that you've done in one of those 6 seasons that brought the best results that maybe you weren't expecting that you would recommend people to implement?
So I'll answer that question first before I get into the what's going to exist 10 years from now. That test of treating YouTube podcasts as different than audio podcasts, I would definitely recommend everyone. YouTube would love for you to just take your audio podcast, throw it on there with a cover album. I mean, they'll make it so simple. It's just another distribution platform. But you're logging into YouTube and you're just seeing a square image of your podcast logo and you're not getting any of the video aspect there. At the same time, you have to realize that video is different than audio podcasts. And so in the future, I might more edit the video episode and get that down to a 20-minute episode, possibly, if I can figure out the way to really capture the most valuable content for a video audience versus if you want to listen to the full episode, go over the audio. That might be an approach there. You have to approach both of those platforms differently. I know Spotify is adding video, but it's not really taking off as well because nobody goes to Spotify to watch video music albums or music videos at this time. And so that's going to be slower to adapt. I was thinking about listening to one of your episodes. You had a guest on who's so strong in LinkedIn. I'm like, what would a LinkedIn podcast look like where the entire podcast is just posted, is actually purposed first for LinkedIn because that is where our target markets are over there. What would that look like and how would that be different than a 30-minute episode on YouTube? There are some shows that I watch on Facebook, pages that have videos on Facebook, and I'll watch a 12-minute video over there and I don't even know how to get to their YouTube channel just because Facebook is where I watch those videos primarily. So you have to approach each of these channels as a completely separate thing. They've got different audiences. They've got people that are there for different reasons. And so that's the thing that I would recommend. Don't just replicate what you're doing and send it out to 10 different places and expect each of them to be successful. You really do have to take the time, at least at the beginning, and say, this is what we're going to do on YouTube. This is what we're going to do on Spotify. This is what we're going to do for LinkedIn. Build that out and then pass that off to somebody else to continue to optimize that and then maybe revisit it in 2 years and say, is that still what's working over here? But if you take your audio podcast and you're just like, well, we're going to put it everywhere that you can listen to audio, you're not going to get as solid results that way.
A lot of golden nuggets of knowledge here. Your prediction on what's going to still be true in 10 years?
I think what we already talked about. I think podcasting is still going to be about human connection. And so whether it's a single person talking to a microphone, that's going to be an emotional connection, a raw connection of this person is actually sharing from their experience. Whether it's 2 buddies talking about business, you're going to feel the connection between them. That's going to matter. And you're going to want to be in the room with that while it's happening. And whether it's an interview podcast, it's got to be this hour that we have together is about making a connection and having a real discussion rather than just, you're here to market something, I'm here to market something, let's do it together on the same podcast. I think that that's what's going to be true about podcasting 10 years from now still.
Barrett, I loved this. If people want to find out more about you or what you do, where should they go?
Yeah, so The Art of Succession is the podcast. We have a LinkedIn page for The Art of Succession. The podcast on our YouTube channel or on our website is under our firm name, gwcpas.com/podcast.
We'll put all the links in the description. Barrett, thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast.